You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
This is The Edge.
The advantage it means.
They let guy just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
What's the situation, Albert? You'll tell me.
He's talking with the other radio people that he's going to do a hit with, and he'll call back in a minute.
God. Sheltered in fucking place, and still Michael Shure is like, it's like trying to get him.
There's no rest for the pundit in this current world.
I guess you're right. I mentioned your comedy album, Chunks, on the last episode. I think people should pick it up. It's kind of the laugh you may need during this pandemic. So I'll mention it again right now.
There's absolutely nothing prescient about today's situation on the album, so you'll love it.
Yeah, it's perfect escapism. I love a couple of things that are references to your life that have been particularly funny. You know what I mean? I love your chainsaw thing where Josh is part of this chainsaw crew that is like there to scare the public on Halloween. Was that it? A Halloween or some haunted house?
It was a haunted house job, yeah.
And so they put him in
that's an odd bit for me because it's the only time I think I've ever just told a story on stage on the spur of the moment, and it pretty much was the bit.
It's just great. I mean, it really is. It's just so funny. You just have to get that album Chunks to hear him tell the story of how they hire him to be like this Jason character, right?
Sorry, I accidentally dropped him.
Oh, my fucking God, Albert. Jesus fucking Christ. Unbelievable.
Oh, Michael's here, though.
Yeah, but I need.
Whoever is producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
Tell me when you have J. Elvis on the line.
I'm back now.
Jesus fucking Christ, J. Elvis. I apologize.
No problem.
Well, I've got Michael Shure on the line, though, in the interim.
Oh,
so.
Okay, good.
But
it wasn't that good a story.
It's a great story. Pick up the album Chunks to hear the whole story. We celebrate whenever we can get them. I mean, my God. I don't know why it's so goddamn hard to get Michael Shure on the line. But every time we try to reach him, even when he's quarantining. I mean, what could be easier than getting a hold of a guy who can't go anywhere? But still, it's hard. But we have him today, Michael Shure. Yes.
That was Trump press conferencing of you. I mean, I have not been difficult to reach since COVID has hit us. Since the 18th of March, Mark, I have been easy to reach.
But Mark's tactic is always open with an accusation.
It is. That's true. No, that's a good point. Yeah.
I want to put the guest on the defensive if I can.
Absolutely.
It's a good way to go.
Let them fight their way out of the corner.
The Mike Wallace, Mark Thompson style.
Yes.
Jay, Elvis was suggesting that you're kind of the prettiest girl at the dance right now, Mr. Pundit. Pundits are all in demand, all over the place.
Well, they are, and especially ones that were right about Joe Biden, because there weren't very many of them saying after New Hampshire or after Nevada that Joe Biden was still going to be the nominee. But
I am completely astounded that through this process, Joe Biden is the choice. I really am. I just can't believe it. I think I don't know, I want to say the weakest because there were so many people running. But I thought, of the front runners, he was the weakest in terms of his ability to passionately represent a position and articulate things in a kind of contemporary political way that would carry the day. But that's the guy. And, I mean, I feel like it's name recognition that's carrying him, and I would love your thoughts on that.
No, I don't agree. I mean, I think that, of course, name recognition gets you a leg up. Certainly, it works wonders when people know who you are, and you can see it's what's testament to people like Pete Buttigieg, who did so well coming from a name that nobody could even pronounce. Barack Obama, the same thing. But, this was a perfect election for Joe Biden, too, because people don't care about issues. I don't mean everybody, but I meant by and large, the only issue was Donald Trump. And for some reason, they had it in their craw that because Joe Biden can appeal to those, and whether or not he can, we don't yet know, but it's believed that he can appeal to the voters that Trump peeled away from the Democrats last time, That's all the people needed to hear. They know he's not perfect. They don't think he's going to run again. They don't think that he's the best. They don't think that he's all there. Yes, 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 all of that. But by the
It's tough to get all that on a bumper sticker, though, isn't it, Michael?
They don't need a bumper sticker. All the bumper sticker has to say is not Donald Trump, and that's what Democrats believe. They think he's electable. You can't define electable, but that's what they think, Mark.
But you obviously thought that was what was going to happen too. So do you think he's electable?
I do think he's electable. I think I think a lot of them were electable. I think he's probably the most electable because he's a safe known quantity. The unknown that Donald Trump was, even though he was a celebrity, you knew all about him in New York and whatnot. How he would govern was unknown. He was standing up to the establishment, yada yada. Now there's a yearning for a return to normal. The same way we sit in our homes and feel the same way now. We just want to get back to doing things that were mundane that we could just do. I think that's sort of representative of what the electorate, the Democrats, want as well.
I think the biggest appeal of Joe Biden is he's the kind of president you can not see for a week and feel great about it.
Well, and I think I think that's funny, but I think it's also true. Like, you don't want to know every second of what's going on. And listen, I think that he's going to be a little Gerald Ford-like, and he's going to be there to clean up a mess and then move on. I mean, Ford ran for re-election, and he really wanted to win on his own and thought that he could and was devastated by his loss. I don't think that'll be the case with Biden, which is what I think makes his vice presidential pick so important. I never think they matter. I mean, Sarah Palin proved that maybe they do matter a little bit, but Dan Quayle proved that they don't matter. I don't think that Hillary Clinton didn't lose because of Tim Kaine, as many progressives want to tell you. The truth is they don't matter. This time they will, because that's going to be a baton holder when Biden says in 2.5 years, you know what, I'm not going to run for re-election.
Yeah. In that spirit, I have to ask you about that. Then I want to talk about the sexual assault allegations, and I also want to talk about the election itself. But quickly, because you mentioned the vice presidential pick, the headline in Wall Street world, Biden picks Warren, he'll get no support and he'll lose the election. Give us the drill down a little bit on that, and then how you evaluate the other major candidates to be VP on the ticket.
First of all, I think that Wall Street has a pretty big megaphone, but I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I don't think that people are going to vote for Donald Trump who don't already want to vote against Donald Trump. And so I don't think Elizabeth Warren is a deal breaker. I don't think she's the best pick, because she didn't do very well, right? I mean, she made a lot of noise, but she didn't get a lot of votes, and she's not young enough. And I think Joe Biden has to somehow connect with younger Democrats. And I'm not talking about the progressives who say they won't vote. I don't think that they look, with due respect to all of those passionate people, I don't think that they're as noisy in real life as they are on Twitter. And I don't think the Democrats yet look to them in that way. They love Bernie Sanders' support because of what he represents, but they're not trying to appeal to every single one of those voters with their vice presidential pick. But I do think youth is helpful, because I think what it does is it brings some needed vitality to this ticket and a safety net, right? I don't think people look at Elizabeth. I think people will look at this vice presidential running mate as someone more likely to become president than others we have seen before. And that's why I don't know that Elizabeth Warren is the right pick here. He's going to pick a woman. He said he's going to. And there's some women that did better than others in the race. Kamala Harris got out early, so she wasn't really tested. But she's exactly the type of running mate that Joe Biden could use. Someone with energy, someone who can articulate a position really well and defend Joe Biden really well. Because Joe Biden doesn't defend Joe Biden really well. We'll get to what he said today, which I thought was actually quite good. But I think that he needs that. And I don't know that Elizabeth Warren is that. She's a little bit there's a little bit more going on with Elizabeth Warren.
I do think that from a practical standpoint, Elizabeth Warren is an excellent selection because there's an economy to rebuild, and she knows the economy as well or better than any other candidate, I think.
No question. Yeah. And that's, again, goes back to what we were talking about before, which is, tackling the problems once you get to the White House. Let's get to the White House first, and then there'll be plenty of people like Elizabeth Warren who could be nominated to Treasury Secretary, Secretary of State, whatever.
I think that's an excellent point.
And Democrats are much more bullish on their chances of winning the Senate now, and I think that factors as well. They can get appointments through if that happens, and Biden knows that, and so do the people who working for him.
I want to double back to Biden in a second, but just because you mentioned the Senate, this could be a blue wave, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they already waived the House. So a blue wave is when you get, like when you get the White House, you get the House, you get the Senate, or you have a blue wave in the House. There's never a wave in the Senate necessarily because there are fewer seats. But I will say that you're right in that there could be, as you look at some of these teetering races and races that are starting to move by the people that cover them really well and say that they're solid Republican, lean Republican, likely Republican, they're softening on the hard Republicans now. There's a lot of time. 6 months is an eternity, as you know. And I think that that when you look at the possibility of winning North Carolina, and you're looking at Montana, and you have in your back pocket Arizona and Colorado, the Republicans are in trouble because there's going to be a surprise, too, that we're not even talking about now because there always seems to be, or there usually seems to be. This is not good, and it's not good for Susan Collins either if that's what happens.
I'll miss Susan Collins if she goes away. The breathless way the press suggests she may go either way on any number of things, from the Kavanaugh vote to impeachment or whatever. And then, of course, she always goes the predictable way. Doesn't she? Maybe she's surprised along the way. Has she, Michael?
No, I mean, not in marked ways. No, I think on the big issues, she stayed with her party. I don't think that you've seen her leave. Maybe healthcare, and I'd have to look at that. But I don't think that when she's the deciding vote, it's already decided.
In the John McCain vote on healthcare, she was always in the blue camp.
Yeah.
So now let's double back to Joe Biden for a moment. Let me say one thing about Joe Biden before we get into the sexual assault allegations. One of the things I don't like about Joe Biden, and there are actually a lot of things, but I understand he's the guy, and, I would vote for my cat to be the president rather than the guy we've got. But the junkyard dog nature of media today, that is to say, when you speak plainly and when you can package things in an almost incendiary way, I think that's the stuff that carries the day. That's why Trump is so great, because that's really the only way he speaks. And I think Kamala Harris, whom you mentioned, is really good. I think actually pretty much the others in the field of consideration are pretty good. Even Elizabeth Warren, I think, speaks in sort of for the contemporary media environment, a media-friendly way. Joe Biden still feels as though he packages everything so he's rounded off the edges. So from the standpoint of any kind of campaign, and this is a weird campaign, right? The retail politics part of this campaign is done. It's all done through media and podcasts and appearances and Skype stuff. I kind of wish that he had whomever, in this case, Joe Biden, I wish the Democrats had somebody who was a little more able to punch through. Do you get my point?
Yeah, I do. I get it. You're not going to change Joe Biden. He's 78 years old. He has worked in politics for half a century by being genteel, by being someone who has rounded off those edges. And I totally agree with you that having somebody who doesn't, it would be good for him. But it also is he's become, a reelected senator 6 times, a vice president twice, and now he's the nominee for the presidency. So he has to feel like he's doing something right at this point, and you're not going to change that. You can add to it with someone who can defend that, like you said, somebody who could speak in this media environment in a different way. You're not going to get it from Biden.
It would be very easy for Biden to new Coke himself if he tried.
Yeah, no question. Yeah.
The Joe Biden response to these allegations of sexual assault, they come forward in a statement initially. While the details of these allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault are complicated, 2 things are not complicated. One is that women deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and when they step forward, they should be heard, not silenced. The second is that their story should be subject to appropriate inquiry and scrutiny. Responsible news organizations should examine and evaluate the full and growing record of inconsistencies in her story, which has changed repeatedly in both small and big ways. So that's his overall statement. Then he gets into the X's and O's of it. And the X's and O's essentially, Michael, are that she didn't go to the supervisors with stories of a sexual assault. She didn't go to any official that she could complain to and file a grievance with and mention a sexual assault of any kind. Isn't that essentially what he's saying?
Yeah, I mean, it is essentially, but like you said, there are many things he's saying, and if you do get to the X's and O's, that is what he's saying, and I think that that defense is one that is has been used to good effect many times, where you kind of break it down and say, well, where were you when I wasn't running for president? Where were you? Now, of course, she's going to come back and say I was talking to people about it, and that I didn't go through the proper channels doesn't change what I allege happened. But you also, at a certain point, I think, have to evaluate the situation in its entirety, and that's what the Biden people are hoping wins the day, that his record on women's rights and his record in support of women has by and large been good, and the things that have been in the column of creepy Joe Biden, as the president calls him, are things that are, it's really sort of over affection that he has shown towards men and women, and he's noted to be, even by me, a close talker. So when you talk to the vice president, if you have his ear, he's right in your face, and he'll put his hand on your shoulder, and he'll put his hand on your elbow, and that's just his stock and trade. Doesn't excuse any of it, and also times have changed where people don't do that quite to the same effect.
This pandemic has to be really rough for him, huh, then from that standpoint also?
Oh, my God, yeah, no question. I mean, imagine running for mayor and not being able to shake a hand, and then you're Joe Biden, who just puts his arm around everyone and puts both hands on people's shoulders and whispers to people. And this is just it's a really tough race for Joe Biden to be in, because it's against everything he does. That said, I think he's learning that he can do well by staying out of the spotlight and just let the time pass here, because his numbers have been just fine.
That point that you've made at the end is the interesting one. He should learn. He should hear what Michael Shure just said, because if you're concerned with winning, you should shut up. You issued a statement. Maybe you want to do a controlled environment interview on it, but otherwise get that man an IV of vitamin C and put him in Rancho Mirage and tell him to stay the hell out of the spotlight. I mean, I just don't get it.
But I think he has been. I mean, I think this, this was a moment where a direct answer to this question was demanded, and he provided that. But I think for the most part, he has just been sitting there letting out rope for Trump.
Yeah, but he went on Morning Joe, that show on MSNBC.
The first is about your University of Delaware records. Do you agree with the reporting that those records were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were resealed for a longer period of time until after you leave, quote, public life? And if you agree with that, if that's what happened, why did that happen?
Now, just the question throws some shade on him. Here's his answer.
Because, look, the fact is that there's a lot of things of speeches I've made, positions I've taken, interviews that I did overseas with people, all of those things relating to my job. And the idea that they would all be made public in the fact while I was running for public office, they could be really taken out of context. Their papers are position papers. They are documents that existed and that when I, for example, when I met with Putin or when I met with whomever, and all of that to be fodder in a campaign at this time, I don't know of anybody who's done anything like that. And so the National Archives is the only place there would be anything having to do with personnel records. There are no personnel records in the Biden papers at the university.
So personnel records aside, are you certain there was nothing about Tara Reid in those records? And if so,
I am absolutely certain.
Why not approve a search of her name in those records?
Approve a search of her name?
Yes, and reveal anything that might be related to Tara Reid in the University of Delaware records.
There is nothing. They wouldn't. They're not there. And if it's, I don't understand the point you're trying to make.
The point I'm trying to make is that
there are no personnel records by definition.
The point I'm trying to make is that you are approving and actually calling for a search of the National Archives records of anything pertaining to Tara Reid. I'm asking why not do the same in the University of Delaware records, which have raised questions because they were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were sealed for a longer period of time. Why not do it for both sets of records?
Because the material in the University of Delaware has no personnel files, but it does have a lot of confidential conversations that I had with the president about a particular issue.
So you get the idea. I mean, he handled it okay, but I feel as though this is where the media will give it a greater half-life than it might have otherwise. Michael Shure, your thought?
I disagree entirely. I think that the less that he said, the less upfront he was. When the Washington Post editorial board says it's time for you to speak, he has to address this. He has to face these. He wasn't going to hear maybe as much from the Trump campaign because that's a pretty glass house in which they live. But he had to come out because there are Democrats who wanted to know the answer. The other part of it that people aren't talking about is he is going to be naming a female vice presidential candidate. He has to give these people cover. People who will serve in his cabinet. People who will be co-chairs in states. People who are going to be on the woman who's going to be on the ticket with him, whoever that is. You have to give these people some cover. If it's just sitting out there, it's too difficult and too unfair to ask someone to be your surrogate and have them answer a question that you've never answered.
In our last couple of minutes, give me some thoughts on the political fallout from Trump, his administration, in terms of his handling of this pandemic. You know, he's made so many calculations along the way about the public statements, these daily briefings, what he says. But you also see how his personal animus and political animus is playing out in terms of what governors and what states receive aid. How much of that stuff sticks to him?
Well, I think quite a bit more than ever did. And I think the interesting part of this is, people are saying that every press conference, every one of these press conferences is like the rally that he was holding to really great success around the country in areas where he was sought after. And the problem with that is more people are watching these press conferences. Whether you agreed with him that there were 20,000 people in the arena or you agreed with the police who said that there were 9, he was still reaching people who were there because they wanted to see him. Now people are watching this, A, because they have nothing else to do, B, because they're in we as a country are in a crisis looking to the president. More of an audience is seeing him and judging him than did at these rallies. And I think the reviews have been so bad, and the discomfort that people have with the message coming out of the White House is really, really detrimental to the president, which is why I think he wants to get back on the road. He wants to stop doing these things. He wants America to get back to normal even ahead of time, because that would free him to do what has worked for him.
In our next visit, which I hope will be in the next episode, if you can work us in, I'd like to talk about the way that the news is being culled, both in terms of presenting it to the president to reflect only positive news or primarily positive news. And I'd also like to talk about how that ultimately gets into the public discourse as releases from the White House that also just spin positive. So can we get to that next time?
We sure can.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Shure, everybody.
Oh, thank you. You guys are all so kind. Still sticking with the show.
Yeah.
Mark, they're 6 feet apart and they're still making that much noise.
I know. They're remarkable. They really are remarkable.
We've had them all sitting on Zoom this whole time.
Yes. Just for your intro and outro.
Jay Elvis, this was great. I like when you're on the show with me.
Always a pleasure, Michael.
Yeah.
All right.
Jay Elvis. That's more of a smattering of applause for Jay Elvis.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's keep it light.
Yeah. All right, Michael, we'll let you go. We're hanging out Jay Elvis, but thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Yeah, bye.
All right. See
bye,
you.
Michael.
Bye.
Jay Elvis.
Yes.
You and I can talk for a moment. I wonder, he makes some very good points about Joe Biden, and I guess he actually persuaded me in terms of what Joe Biden has to say and how sort of Joe Biden has to face the music and then tell us what the tune of the music actually is. I think I think before this, I was just thinking, God, just shut up, man, because he goes on and talks himself into he's kind of like he's his own version of Trump without, but he's got a knowledge base that's real,
he suffers from what I call in comedy writing first thought theater a little bit, but I think, I don't know. I honestly think that answer was incredibly honest,
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the wrong way to play it. I think honest is good. It's not, it didn't seem evasive. It's like, no, you don't go through these. The reason they're sealed is because they could affect my political career, I
meant to ask Michael one thing. I will mention it here. And that is about halls of Congress. Her allegation is that it happened in the halls of Congress. I will say one thing before I tell you this, and that is having heard her speak on podcasts and in the New York Times. They interviewed the writer from the New York Times who then actually played some of the recordings of her speaking. I believe her that something happened. I really do. I found her very credible. That said, there are parts of the story that do, like I have trouble squaring them. So having said that, I just believe her essentially, but parts of the story I'm having trouble squaring, I'm going to just tell you the things I can't square, and one of them is that congressional hallway. If you've gone to Congress, and I've talked to a lot of people who worked in Congress, it's hard to find a congressional hallway that isn't populated by something more than just one person. So you're telling me that you're sexually assaulted in a congressional hallway. He pulled this off and nobody else was around. I mean, he found that one moment. Now, maybe, again, my sense of it is as less of a desolate place than it actually is. But that really is my understanding. I was talking to several people who work on Capitol Hill, and they go, wow, I don't know how you find a moment in one of those hallways where there aren't other people around.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that is the factor that always bumps me about the story, which is, even the most vicious predator, thinks two steps, even if there was no one in the hallway that second. She's telling the story as if he was trying to get something to proceed at that moment in that hallway. Seems unlikely to me.
Yeah. And then the other thing that was odd to me that I couldn't square was that just a couple of years ago, 2017, she was speaking about Joe Biden as a good candidate for president. I think it was a Facebook post or something like that. And that was weird. I mean, you didn't find Christine Blasey Ford, who had the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, coming out and saying, I think Brett Kavanaugh should be sitting on the Supreme Court. We need to get somebody like Brett Kavanaugh on the bench. And then she comes forward and goes, hey, I got some stuff to tell you about Brett Kavanaugh. He raped me when I was a kid. You know what I mean? I have trouble squaring that. That's just at minimum the two things that I have trouble squaring.
Well, and I think and a corollary to that as well is her being on the record talking about him touching people uncomfortably but not sexually,
Right. I mean, there is no question that this dude was touching people and making them uncomfortable, and Michael touched on that. I mean, if you'll pardon the expression, he spoke of the fact that he was both, physically familiar with men and women. Hey, I've got guys in the office I'm working in now, they always like to hug. I mean, now the pandemic, it may be the one upside. Those guys won't hug me anymore. But
I think normal people always could look at Joe Biden and find a creepy factor. Creepy doesn't equal malevolent.
Right. As I say, on some level, I believe that something happened because she's very credible. Again, to the degree that you can assess these conversations and, listen to somebody's voice and go, that sounds like they're being truthful. But apart from that, I just can't quite square the whole thing. And then you get this, which is, hey, Democrats, why don't you be honest? You think it's one sexual assaulter who might have sexual assaulted this woman, probably did, against guy who assaulted, 45 women. And it seems indisputable that the majority of those, if not all of those, are legit. And he did pay off, after all, a porn star to stay quiet during his run-up to the presidency. And he bragged about sexually assaulting women. Again, he said it was just locker room talk. I mean, I don't know what locker room that is. But he bragged about that in the run-up to the election as well. So when you put those two things stacked up against each other and you just do the sexual assault evaluation, one guy is a clear winner over the other.
Yeah, but obviously, for some people, it's going to be that calculation. Hopefully in the next 6 months, there's more that can be more conclusive about this accusation, I guess. But I don't know that there will be.
I also think that there's just so many other things going on, and I don't know how long the media attention will be on this, but, you have Americans dying, you have people scared, you have the relaxation of a stay-at-home order state to state. I think those relaxations will be accompanied by more outbreaks, more deaths. You have testing, you have false negatives, you have false positives. The testing thing is a mess. I'd love to get into that in our next episode. Going to have a specialist on to talk about it, but it's really a mess because of those false positives and negatives.
My wife went and got tested yesterday.
Which one did she get?
She got the swab, the cheek swab one, where they hand it to you and you put it in the bin. But it took her about 3 hours to get it.
She had to wait that long to get in, or what?
Yeah.
Now, why did she get it?
Because she had a bug up her ass.
There's no test for that?
There is no test for that. Not, make up your mind. We got to adjust the chair. I think it's the joke for that one.
I was just having a drink of water, so I couldn't laugh out loud. Make up your mind. We have to adjust the chair. Come on. It's J. Elvis Weinstein, you guys. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oh. So anyway, she waits 3 hours and she gets it.
She got it, with no results yet, but she just she wanted to know. So, okay. No. The mayor says it's a good citizen thing to do because they want the data. So.
Yeah. I don't know what to do with my girlfriend. She's going back out into society, and I'm going to remain under the bed for the next 18 months.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if I get it, it's from her.
You're like, I think, yeah, you want to be on the record with that.
Plus, she's economically incentivized to kill me because she's in, my trust or will and stuff,
Yeah.
Like she could make some dough if I'm not around.
Oh, let me tell you, Mark, we all have some incentive to kill you.
Stop that! Stop it! Don't encourage him. Oh. Well, J. Elvis, we love visiting with you. I may just post that, just our kind of conversation with Michael and our little wrap up. Do I need a whole hour or not? Not always, right?
I think just make a little show out of it, and if we do it more often, people will like that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Then thanks, J. Elvis, and let's rock another episode next week.
I'm in.
I should mention that J. Elvis has his own podcast. It's called Thought Spiral. He does it with Andy Kindler.
Correct.
And now they do a thing
it's a weekly daily podcast now.
Yeah, you record something every day and then you post it at the end of the week.
Yeah.
How great is that? I am excited to watch that evolve even further. You two kids with your podcast. I also would encourage you to check out Chunks. Once again, that's J. Elvis's album. It's a comedy album. You can find it on iTunes, and you can find your other offerings or screen offerings. He's a documentary filmmaker and an actor. Where can people see your other work as we wrap up?
One of my documentaries, I Need You to Kill, is available on Amazon Prime and other streaming places right now. It's about the comedy scene in Asia. I got another one coming out in July called Michael J. Barr, Who Do You Want Me to Be? And I got a movie I co-starred in coming out around the same time called The Fiddling Horse.
Look at you. Look at you. No pandemic stop for you. J. Elvis Weinstein. Thank you, J. Elvis.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us, everyone. It's been fun. I am wanting to talk about the Biden situation more. We'll do it in our next episode. I'm also wanting to talk about two things. Vaccines. I think there's some realities about vaccines that we should begin to understand. I think the overwhelming reality is that they just take a long time. The fast tracking of these vaccines, I even heard Fauci say, you could tell in this sort of tentative thing, well, we're, doing away with a lot of the normal protocols because the 3 stages that they run every vaccine through, right? Safety, efficacy, and then side effects. You can only do that when you let the timeline be longer. Now we're not going to have that. You have to hope that side effect part, which is the longest part at the end, the last phase, that things can be done such that that's not going to be an issue. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about that in the next episode, along with the herd immunity concept and the realities concerning that. Also, some of the treatments. So we'll do a little more COVID-19 focus with a guest next week. Thanks for all the ways you support the show. Really, now, all we ask you to do is subscribe. And, if you hear something you like, give us a positive review. 5 stars is what you need to kind of stay relevant in the iTunes universe. We're a little podcast, but we appreciate the community of people who regularly download and listen. So until next time, bye-bye.
I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. And if you haven't already, why don't you show your support and subscribe? What's the matter with you? Go to Edge Show. Oh, that's Edge Dash. What's with the dash? Stupid. All right, I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. To show your support and leave something on their website, edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash?